people rarely forget. I'd like to say never forget, but in some cases they will, so rarely forget. So if you put someone in a bad position, you sell them a bad product, you give them bad service, they're not going to forget that.
Right.
And they're going to share that with their peers in their community.
What's up, everybody? Appreciate you all for tuning into the Undefeated Underdogs podcast. I'm your host, Sharath. I'm grateful for you for taking time to tuning into the episode. Today, I have a special guest. I have Dan Westgarth, the COO of Deel. Deel is a one-stop HR solution, and if you're a founder, a startup founder, like thinking to expand your team and working with global talent, Deel is your thing. Go sign up at Deel. They do like phenomenal things, like working with contractors and like hiring full-time employees in worldwide. So Dan and I, we had like a brief call before this episode, and man, I have to tell you guys, I'm super impressed by the immigrant hustle he exhibited and the way he actually went from being a customer support rep to where he is right now, the COO of Deel, which is a big transition. And I'm excited to like get into it, and let's unpack this beautiful story. Dan, welcome to the show. How are you feeling today?
Dude, good to be here. I'm feeling awesome.
Awesome. That's great. I always like want to hear that from the guest. But yeah, let's get into it. I think right off the bat, I have like this obvious question. So you work at Deel as a COO. Let's tell us about what's your day to day look like. What are some things that you do that pushes Deel to the next level?
I always have about 10 special projects. Out of those 10, I select a single priority. It's very easy to have many different priorities. I think it's really important to have one.
Mm-hmm.
And that is always the thing that I'll focus on from the special projects roster the most,
Right.
and stop at nothing to get done.
Right.
And that's always a very high impact thing
Right.
for Deel, for us as a business.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of from the special project side, and then also we have the day-to-day running of the business. So operations at Deel is 600 plus people. We look after payroll, we look after customer support, payroll operations, financial crime prevention. We do HR as a service, we've got HR experience. So all of that stuff is dashboarded. It's running 24/7.
Right.
And I will check in on that. I'll check in on that multiple times a day and understand why is efficiency dipping in a certain country, or why is there a backlog starting to pick up in a certain area or on a certain topic. And that is something that's living and breathing. And if you're not checking its vitals, you don't know how its health is. So I'd say there's two sides. One side, special projects, those 10 things, single priority. Second side, it's keeping the business moving, keeping the business running.
Yeah, keep the wheels going, right? So let's cover the first part. Let's unpack a little bit. Mostly I'm interested in how do you decide which one to pick up, which project to pick up? Because like you said, if you have 10 ideas, especially you being the face of the company in a way that actually moves the company to the next level, what are some things that you consider that are priorities that moves the needle for Deel, or any advice for people you can give who struggle and suffer in terms of prioritization between all these ideas?
Being problem focused is the advice that I would give. Every project that I run in operations is solving some problem.
Right.
We quantify how big that impact is. For instance, it could be a margin or revenue driven project, very easy to quantify. A change in margin or a change in revenue.
Interesting.
Or it might be an efficiency based project. For example, one of the projects we're running right now at Deel is setting up country pods of support agents that can do highly specialized work within a certain country without needing to escalate that workload to second line and third line specialists.
Right.
But that drives efficiency for Deel. It drives margin efficiency, but it also drives a lot of customer efficiency and improves the customer experience because their query is now being solved at a first level. It doesn't need to be reassigned or escalated.
Right.
Um, I think that's a good example of where you perhaps have impact of on many different angles.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think what you said is kind of makes sense, even for founders who just generally struggle with what should we pick. Like, I think quanticizing and kind of tagging it to the company growth itself is going to, like, work a lot. All right, let's kind of like take a step back, and I want to ask this specific question. In our brief intro call, you mentioned that you started a business at the age of 10. Talk to me about it. Like, man, that's at the age of 10, you basically have to play with your friends, not like build businesses, right? What's going in your mind? Like, what made you like start a company? Tell me, explain to the audience the story about that.
I really wanted a PlayStation 3, the PS3, around my 10th birthday, and I didn't have the money to buy one. My parents weren't going to buy me one.
Right,
So my dad said to me, if you want to buy one, you have to go and make some money, and then that will
right,
unlock the purchase that you want to make.
right.
So I, I found on eBay that you could buy used PlayStation 3s or broken PlayStation 3s, and I found that broken PlayStation 3s were probably 25%, if not 20% the value of the brand new working one. So maybe I could buy that and I could figure out how to fix it. Anyway, I went through with this. I
Right.
bought one, I bought a broken one. It had a Blu-ray error. And on YouTube, there was some dude somewhere
Mm-hmm.
explaining how to replace the Blu-ray laser
Mm-hmm.
of the PlayStation and fix the PlayStation. So I went ahead and
Mm-hmm.
did that and fixed the first PlayStation, played on it, got the games that I want. I was like, oh, okay, I can now sell this for
Mm.
some margin, and then I'll
Right.
repeat another used one, and I'll change the Blu-ray laser, and I'll use that as my personal machine. I did that like 3 or 4 times. Like, oh, okay, this is starting to become interesting. And
Right.
some of the PlayStations that I wasn't able to fix, I could then split those up and sell further parts. So I got to
Mm.
rinse and repeat this for a couple of years until PlayStation stopped producing units with faulty Blu-ray lasers. A lot
Right.
of
Yeah. It's so it's kind of like, necessity is like the mother of invention, right? Your desire to like buy these little things made you to, like, become. I think that seed is really important. uh and after that, what did you do? Like, did you really love the whole business side of things, like flipping, adding, like, repairing and all that? Like, what caught you, like, the most interest? Like, okay, this is something I'm really good at.
I think it was the community side of it. It was really
Okay.
exciting. I got to a certain point, 10, 11 years old, and friends wanted to buy PlayStations and they had similar constraints. And they
Okay.
would then come to me and say, well, can I buy this PlayStation from you? And they would do that. And then they would come to me and say, well, I've actually broken my phone. Can you fix this too? Before you know it,
Mm.
you have this very strong community. And then when you have
Wow.
that, selling into that community and selling into that market is
Right.
so easy. And I think that's
Right.
what I found really exciting. And I've applied that in mature business, right? The
Mm.
last couple of companies and also investments that I've made, I think a strong community is really, really important. And I think really back to the original question of what do you prioritize
Mm-hmm.
when you're running a startup? I think that is a really, really difficult problem
Mm.
to solve. It's almost impossible to understand what to prioritize. Whereas with a big company, it's actually pretty easy because I
Mm.
have this long list of things that I need to do. Quantifying, prioritizing is way easier than when you're a startup. And I think when you're a
Mm.
startup, your community will really help you prioritize because they will create a market need. Oh, I need this product, I need it now. And then you'll say as a founder,
Mm.
well, okay, I'm going to go out and build that, and then sell into that community-based market.
Oh man, like, I think you've tasted firsthand community experience, like, way younger. I really love that story because I expected something else, something different. Like, maybe you caught the enthusiasm of like selling, the joy of, like, or the thrill or the adrenaline effect that you get when you do something right. On the other side, you just said people, which is very fascinating to me. uh, what are some lessons that you still carry from 10-year-old Dan, 11-year-old Dan, that you still value at a higher percentage in your life about community or about doing certain things?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One is people rarely forget. I'd like to
Mm,
say never forget, but in some cases they will also rarely forget. So if you put someone in a bad position, you sell them a
mm,
bad product, you give them bad service, they're not going to forget that.
right.
And they're going to share that with their peers in their community.
Mm,
Second thing is, world is really small.
mm,
And I've seen that, like, not in my teenage years, but the last decade in my 20s, when you're working in whatever industry it might be. Like, I'm in technology and specifically fintech, HR tech.
mm-hmm,
Um, that community is really small. It could be somebody
mm,
based in Hong Kong or Singapore, and
right.
they will have mutual connection with somebody in London. And I
Right.
think the point that I would make here is it doesn't matter what industry you're in on the professional side, the world is still really small, whether it's investment banking, medicine,
Yeah.
whatever else. So those things combined, there's no real running away from people or communities, right? Because the world is very small. And number two, people don't forget. So it's really important that you treat people well and that
Mm,
whatever you're building is rolled
mm,
out with a lot of thought and care.
mm. I love that. I think both of those lessons are so powerful. The world itself, tech especially, man, like it's so small, right? Like the way you connected with me. I had a friend who DM'd me like after me tweeting that this is my dream podcast list, and he, if I'm not wrong, is Andrew, right? Like, or Andre,
Mm-hmm.
right? Shout out to him for connecting me to you. It's such a small world. Like, I'm a big fan of Deal afar, like observing how you guys like make moves and like helping, remote distribution work solve and all that. And such a world, like, we're talking right now and we're building this, beautiful story out from you. I think tech world is really small. And the other point which you said, I absolutely, I suggest like people to go one extra mile to do that, which is show care and show thought and build like relationship with your community, your audience, your friends, the people you work with, right? And the people you look up to, or the people you advise as well, right? Everybody counts. Everybody is kind of like a small family. I love those, two specific drops you made. You're from UK, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yeah.
So you and I, we kind of like share this immigrant uh hunger, hustle and all that. Like, talk to him about like how you navigated that energy and converted that energy into fuel for yourself to make a big career out of it.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point because a lot of my friends in my personal circle are immigrants or from immigrant families, and most
Hmm.
of which come from developing countries.
Hmm.
Maybe the second or third generation, but still, like the parents moved to UK or US
Right.
from developing countries. I never really considered myself as an immigrant moving from UK to US,
Hmm.
but I am an immigrant,
Mm-hmm.
and I never really thought that I had immigrant mentality. Right,
Oh,
UK guy in US. I didn't have this background coming from a developing country. I didn't categorize myself as kind of like having immigrant hunger and immigrant mentality. And it's just the
right.
past year or so, I had this dawning realization that
Right.
I absolutely am and absolutely do have immigrant mentality. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter if you come from the most privileged background in the world, but
Mm-hmm.
moving out of your country, your city, going somewhere else, setting up,
Hmm.
finding somewhere to live, finding connections, making friends,
Mm-hmm.
fighting in your job and in your career to grow and elevate yourself. It's
Hmm.
really the same process.
Right.
And it can happen at so many different levels, right? My
Right.
girlfriend's parents, for example, they work in blue collar jobs. They were immigrants from a developing country, but the
Hmm.
same thing exists, like the
Yeah.
same hunger, the same mentality. And I thought that was like something that I realized personally. I thought that was fascinating.
Right. No, I have to echo to your point. Take Harry and Meghan, the royal family. They moved to the US. Even they're struggling. It's not like, they're the most privileged background you ever imagined, right? Like they come from a privileged family, everybody's watching them. Yet I saw the documentary recently, I think a couple months ago. Yet they struggle to find a place to live. So it's, to your point, it's so real. It doesn't matter where you come from. Maybe you have little edge if you come from a privileged family, you have a little money and whatnot, but you always have that struggle in, and you have like a chip on your shoulder in a way, right? You want to prove, you want to build a good relationship in this new arena, pushing yourself beyond the boundary and whatnot. uh, that's so fascinating. I think that's partly one of the reasons I think why Deal acquired LegalPad. I'm a big fan of LegalPad. There, that company actually helped me break into tech. When I broke into tech, like, my first job in tech, I used to be on H1B visa, and LegalPad is the one who helped me. So shout out to them. I think partly that's one of the reasons. I think you were pretty much involved in the acquisition as well. Talk to me about like how you guys treat immigration, acquisition of legal pad and everything. What are some things that you want to pursue in the future to make things work easy for immigrants working at US companies and vice versa, right? Like some folks working at UK companies and whatnot.
Part of our mission is to break down borders, whether it's
Mm.
in hiring, managing, paying your workforce. And mobility just is a part of that story. People want to move around within different countries, and there are different pull and push factors. Maybe it's family, maybe it's a business obligation, maybe you're doing the run the business work that we talked about earlier. You need to be in a specific time zone or a specific country, but
Mm.
finally, people will always want to move, and the services available to make that happen I would say somewhat suboptimal.
Mm-hmm.
We want to optimize them, make them available to
Mm-hmm.
everybody on the Deal platform. So moving between countries is very easy.
Right.
We've had an immigration service and an immigration offering for some time, even before the days of our acquisition of LegalPad. But that immigration service was mainly based in Europe or covering Europe, Middle East, Africa. The
Mm.
LegalPad component is very
Mm.
heavily focused on North America. So
Mm.
really great story. Natural
Right.
natural match between Deal and LegalPad and the
Mm-hmm.
mission that we're on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, legal pads. Oh my God, I think uh, I have countless time recommended legal pad to like many folks who are like who wants to break into tech. They made my first transition super easy. I used to work at a corporate job, and the founders itself, they're very passionate as well. They just want to like they have skin in the game. They're very empathetic towards operators, and yeah, I think kudos on it's match made in heaven for you guys, and I feel like you're going to improve a lot in terms of solving immigration and like removing boundaries. uh let's also take a couple step backs. I want to unpack the whole getting into deal story, which is quite fascinating. But before there, Revolut, like, talk to me about it. Like, I think you started as a partnerships manager or customer service rep. You talk to me about like how you entered that company and leading to deal. What's like the story behind it?
Yeah, I was looking for first professional graduate position, and I studied natural environment degree in surveying. And the blue chip companies in that space were particularly interesting to me. You have to put on a suit and tie every day and spend a lot of time visiting physical sites. I didn't want to do that. I've always been a bit of a geek deep down. I like being um, on the computer and working on tech-based solutions.
Mm-hmm.
That's really where my deep interest is. I think deep interest is there, and also in finance and capital markets. Combination of two of them. And I had job offers from the blue chip companies in the natural environment space, but I was looking for something that would feed my appetite for
Right.
curiosity. And
Right.
I came across Revolut, fired off a application, and actually spoke with the Revolut team on, I think, Facebook Messenger because they were so
Right.
small at the time. And I managed to get to the CEO of Revolut through Facebook Messenger,
Hmm.
and he said, oh, "Okay, come down for an interview, and we'll find a position for you." So, I was hired as a partnerships manager. The person that hired me was not at the business on my first day, and they didn't really know what to do with me. He said, "Okay, fine, you're a young guy, go and do customer support." And
Mm.
I was pretty good at that. And then moved into the operations team, and then
Mm.
finally product management and general management, and launched Revolut in the US.
Mm. That's awesome. So you kind of touched the partnerships, the customer service side of things, and you also touched the product side of things. uh, how is it like, so what are some things that you learned as you progressed from Revolut to Deal about taking care of customers? What are some things that you want to pass to the listeners about how should they take care of customers, how much of a priority they should give to customers, and the things that they should avoid, and when they deal with customers?
Yeah. I think first and foremost, you have to use your product.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter what your position is, how big the product is, you need to find a way to use it. I'm using Deal 10 plus times. And I
Right.
think the answer to that question is like very rarely do execs actually consume the product that the vast majority of their customer base are using. So
Right.
I think starting off in support and actually understanding how customers use the product and how customers feel about the product and the emotional momentum that they build up when using it is really, really important. And
Right.
then, second to that, experience in product management was also really important to understand how the product is built.
Yeah, I think customers are. I loved those both of your lessons, what you learned from Revolut and whatnot. Couple of other things which I want to cover before we dive into the whole, you getting into Deal. So one of what are some important things that you learned as a product manager, at Revolut, like some things that you still carry with you as a CEO of Deal?
I think always putting the customer first and knowing when something is significant enough to change up your product roadmap.
Hmm.
Very easy for product managers to become obsessed about product roadmap and product roadmap accuracy, but there are
Hmm.
certain times where you just need to see what's in front of you and make a change very quickly. And that's going to have
Hmm.
some effect on your product roadmap, but
Hmm.
really that's a good practice. I think it's good practice in business as well. When an opportunity comes along and you need to change something, you make that change immediately. Don't put it off.
Hmm. Love that. What are some common things that you find in between product and operations? Uh, and that I think, first of all, I'm very fascinated with the fact that you moved from product management to, like, something completely different, operations. So, uh, any commonality that you find really interesting that people should focus on?
Totally. I think that good product management and good operations always starts with deep understanding of the topic and the story. For example, we're developing products at Deal, which are a combination of software and moving pieces or ops. For
Right.
example, one of the things that we've recently released is called Anytime Payroll.
Hmm.
We're able to pay anybody at any time, calculate the tax, make social security contributions, tax remittance, and then pay that person. This was a combination of software and
Hmm.
also a lot of operational moving parts.
Hmm.
So I truly believe that the skill set between product manager and operation manager is very similar.
Hmm.
Operation managers tend to have a little bit more bias to action and a little bit more business
Hmm.
experience, but fundamentals are very similar.
Love that. Yeah, that's what I think. That's what my curiosity is, like, what's something that you really like helped you move from product to, like, operation. So awesome. I think I want to also unpack uh, your encounter with Deal. So talk to me about, I think you briefly explained to me how you met Alex, the founder, and how you got into Deal. Talk to me about that. uh, how it all happened.
Totally met Alex and Schwo both on the same day in SF, and they're also really big on networking and community.
Mm-hmm.
from that day of meeting them, I think I spoke with Alex every single day since then on WhatsApp. So we became
Nice.
incredibly close, incredibly good friends, and developed that really tight CEO COO bond right from the get go. So after knowing him for some time, he gave me the opportunity to join us as
Mm.
COO. Previous job at the time was general manager. So
Mm-hmm.
moving from a kind of high growth general manager into a startup COO, to be honest, the transition was very easy. Most of the responsibilities are very similar because really,
Mm.
as a COO of a company of less than 100 people, you kind of are a general manager. You're doing everything and anything, and you're just making it happen. Now,
Mm.
Deel is 2,500 people. Will
Wow.
continue to grow, will continue to acquire other businesses, and the docket for a COO is like very, very, very different.
Mm.
And to be fully transparent, I've invested a lot in training and counseling, and there's quite a few people in the industry which have been significant to my personal growth story.
Mm.
And the operations department is truly awesome. We have a high
Mm.
performance culture. We're 24 by 7. Operations itself is in over 60 different countries. We have
Mm.
teammates to deal in over 100 different countries. So it's a truly international organization. It's a truly
Mm.
multicultural organization. And I have a lot
Mm.
of fun doing it. It's awesome.
That's the important thing. Having a lot of fun. Underline that, guys. Whatever you do, make sure you have fun and you work with people that actually challenge you, right, and bring the best out of you. I'm so glad to hear that, and I'm a big fan of Alex. I love his tweets. So, if one particular thing which I want to also highlight about is you start as a customer rep, right? Customer service rep, in partnerships and whatnot, and you grew to GM level, and now you're in the C-suite, right? What did you do right in this whole process of going from zero to like where you are right now that you feel very proud of? This is something that I kind of figured out for myself that I want to pass it to the listeners.
For me, the common theme has always been hard work. I think that there are many smarter people
Mm-hmm.
than me in the companies that I've worked at. But the thing which was always prevailed has been the hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, you work hard to do the best you can possibly do in any field or in any subject matter. And if I look back at the last 8 years, 9 years that I've been working at professional companies, like a lot of hard work and commitment has gone into that.
Mm-hmm.
Worked 80-hour weeks,
Wow.
or more, like a lot has happened a lot of times, and it's happened back
Right.
to back. When there's big serious projects on the table, you can do
Mm.
that for 6 weeks at a time.
Mm.
And knowing yourself and knowing your limits and knowing when um, you're truly tired and you're at risk of burnout, and then knowing how to work smart and
Mm.
work fast. This is really important. But the hard work has been like consistent theme throughout the career. Because I didn't know how to work fast or how to work smart when I first started out. Right, I was a customer support agent doing tickets. I didn't know how to do this at all. It's just how hard can I work? How many tickets can I do? How can I make the customer feel good? How can I solve that problem? And then
Right.
apply the same thing in product. I hadn't come from a background of product or
Mm-hmm.
engineering, so I was faced with Figma files and screens and GitHub commits, and you kind of just work backwards from that, and then
Right.
you build these techniques, personal techniques. How can I very quickly review Figma designs? How can I understand the developer's code as quickly as possible? How can I translate what I need to do into business requirements, or vice versa? How can I
Mm.
manage different stakeholders? So
Mm.
common thing has always been hard work.
Mm. So it's very interesting what you said about hard work, because I think you have to have like an appetite for learning, right? You always have to push yourselves to like learn something that's completely new. In your case, like you said, you're not a product guy. You learn how to like figure the whole thing out. Do you have like a framework that you implement even till today? Like operations is not, it's no joke, like it's such a big part of a company, especially a fast growing company like Deal. What are some learning techniques or frameworks that you kind of implemented in the past and as you go right now in working at Deal?
Sure, I'm a big fan of using different reading speeds. So very fast, fast, and slow. And I think when it comes to learning, you should read things very fast in the
Mm,
first iteration, and then you kind of have a rough idea of what's going on. And then from that
mm,
very fast read, you can extract the points that are actually really meaningful and will help you understand what's going on. And then you take
mm,
those points and then you build a kind of library, and then you go very, very slow and you ensure that you
mm,
understand everything. And then you question everything and you ask and pull different stakeholders and different people together to understand what's going on. I think
mm.
that's like a pretty good framework for learning that I still practice and will continue to practice forever.
I love that. I think the fast and slow approach is going to, like, it's kind of like a macro micro thing, right? I love that.
I'm doing this up in Slack every morning. We'll have 2,500 people. Slack is the main tool we use for communication.
Right.
Um, so you have to consume so much information in about 30 minutes. I'm definitely reading Slack at a very fast
Mm,
pace. I'm very
mm,
quickly flicking through the application using shortcuts. And then anything which I believe is meaningful or requires action, influence, input, you set it as a reminder. So I'm, 8 o'clock, 8:30, do my very fast reading, drinking some coffee. And then I will go
mm.
into the reminders which require that slow, deep thinking. And then you think, well, how can I influence this person? How can I create energy? How can I create impatience on the
Right.
project? And that's what helps the
Yeah.
company move.
Yeah, I love that. So you yourself said that you're quite new to all of the things that you faced in the past and even now, right? Like, you're still learning. You have this hunger in you, the immigrant hunger and whatnot. Have you ever faced imposter syndrome, especially working with smart people around you?
Yeah, it's not something I've really obsessed about. I've heard other people talk about imposter syndrome for hours. It's never really been something that I really focused on. It's never really a big blocker for me or a big distraction.
And how did you overcome? Like, what are the things that you did, uh, that you fight? I know. I think I have imposter syndrome every single day. Uh, Even now, I'm talking to you. I'm like, am I being, keeping up to myself, to your standard and whatnot, as a host and bringing the conversation? But I think there is no one shot silver bullet. Like, there is no solution for it, which is my take. But I want to hear your take. What is some? How do you handle it?
Man, I don't know. I just don't think I look at things that way. I'm always in the moment, always taking a very short term view on something. My short term view right now is just to answer your question as best I can and create talking points.
Right.
I'm not even thinking on that level, and I rarely think on that level in the moment. So it's
Mm.
never been something I got hung up on.
That's smart. Like, that's one way to, like, handle it. It's basically like purely like, dedicating yourself to this moment and giving your 110, the best you can, to provide value and whatnot. Let's talk about Deal a little bit. Like, what, anything that you want to mention that you're about to do a Deal, like that's something that, that revolutionize HR, or like payment, payroll and whatnot. I think the legal pad acquisition is going to really eliminate the boundaries, like you said. Anything that's exciting in the bag right now for Deal?
Totally, I think it's worth taking a step back and thinking about where Deal started. Deal started as a fintech company. Really, we were a payments company helping contractors raise invoices and get paid for those invoices, and we're still a fintech company today. Fintech is kind of at the core of what we're doing and the core of the technology.
Hmm.
But now we're a HR company. Our tagline and our mission is Deal, the global HR company.
Right.
And I think the reason that we are here is because we've identified so many inefficiencies and exciting problems to solve in the HR space. And when you
Mm,
bring HR and fintech together, you can do even more. So what
mm,
we're doing today, contractors, employees of record, global payroll, I think really is just the tip of the iceberg. We want to get into areas like performance management. We want to be the HR system of record. We want to be offering game-changing benefits, mobility, equity issuance. There's so many problems we can solve,
right.
and we haven't got to the scale we want to be. Deal is about
Right.
Ooh, 15,000 clients right now.
Right.
It's 15,000 companies using the product. I want to be 100,000, million customers using the
Right.
product. And then we'll touch um, so many international workers around the world, and we can use data to then produce efficiencies
Hmm.
and products which have never even been contemplated. Like data in HR is super siloed, and there's some companies and products which are trying to break those silos as
Hmm.
independent businesses and independent offerings. Once we get to the scale that we want to be at, we'll be able to produce those inefficiencies on one single platform.
Love that. Yeah, I'm definitely super bullish on Deal for various reasons. One is, I think, again, going back to removing boundaries. Now everybody can work anywhere thanks to the internet, right? Like you can find interesting opportunities, work with smart people, and Deal is making that super easy. Which is, as long as people have the craving to work, or go beyond globally, you guys are like there forever, right? So which I think, it's going to be a long, long, long time. I want to like touch upon one last thing about you've entered tech, your journey very young, at a very young age, right? You fell in love with entrepreneurship at the age of 10, and you grew super fast, like becoming a GM and now CEO. What advice you give for young folks who are figuring out things, especially people who want to break into tech? Any wisdom that you want to share?
Yeah, a few things. I think first of all, use that global market. Previously, companies were only looking at 50-mile radius of their offices.
Hmm.
Now companies are looking worldwide and they're focusing on the skills, not the location. So as a job seeker, it's really important that your research is on a global level and you find
Hmm.
companies that are interested and you find the positions of those interested companies. Then it's about persistence. I don't think applying for a job is the case of submitting a resume. I think there
Hmm.
needs to be more done than that. You need to be reaching out to the people on LinkedIn, following them on Twitter, understanding, and no, maybe they won't notice you, but maybe they will notice you, and then that will help in your
Right.
application. Especially if you're applying cross border from a different country, from a different region of the world, I think that's really a really important part.
Hmm. That's love. Yeah, I think the way I did was, I relied on two things. One is creating serendipity for myself by being there, like showing up on Twitter every day, creating content or contributing content to other people's posts. Number two is proof of work. Like you have all the power to like take these shots for yourself, like trust, build a side project or a podcast, or write a blog post or start a newsletter and whatnot. I think, like you said, people are right now in a space and zone where they are seeking smart people who put skin in the game, right? And that's the power of the internet, I feel. I just want to echo what you said. But man, this has been like a very fun conversation, Dan, and thanks for sharing, thanks being vulnerable, thanks for like uh so relevant to the folks. Like I think a lot of my audience, they come from immigrant background, they have these big dreams but they don't know where to start. And I think your story is a perfect example, I think, in my opinion, for people to get inspired from. You really are a true example. So thanks for being on the show and like explaining your journey, narrating your story. Any last few thoughts before we wrap up?
And just thanks so much for having me. Great to be here and great to be part of your podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. And again, thanks for folks for listening. We do appreciate your time and your attention. That's like the most important thing for us. Stay tuned for yet another episode. We have like lot many guests like Dan, more inspirational stories, and more unpacking to be done. Until then, cheers.